I am the host of the Super Data Science Podcast. It is the world's most listened to data science podcast. We've had Rohit on the show. We've had Ashwin on the show. We've had Mahesh on the show, actually, over the years, thinking back. I'm perhaps best known for the podcast, but I also wrote a best-selling book called Deep Learning Illustrated, and I did a PhD in machine learning and AI at the University of Oxford. These days, I lecture on AI at Columbia and NYU in New York. And I do I supervise PhD research, actually, at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Who here has heard of Lightning AI, a New York-based company that is doing over $500 million a year in ARR, up from $2 million just 2 years ago, which is pretty wild. And I serve there as a fellow of machine learning practice, as well as running my main gig as co-founder and CEO of YCarrot, an AI software consulting business. You'll hear some examples of clients that I have today and how their needs are changing in this new agentic era, how everyone's needs are changing, and how solutions like you've heard about today at the conference are great solutions. So let's start off by talking about us humans. Humans have been at this human-level intelligence station all alone for hundreds of thousands of years, looking down the tracks, wondering if anything will ever come, actually maybe just mulling around at the station. And then when ChatGPT came out, a lot of people started saying, whoa, what's that coming down the tracks at us? And then with Claude Code releases around February and things accelerating even more in the months since in terms of capabilities, we're going, oh my goodness, it's coming fast. And so we are here at this point in history, a very brief timeline. You know, this is kind of the most recent decades. And now we have this period right here for a few months, maybe a few years, where a lot of general AI capabilities around text-to-text, multimodal processing, a lot of intelligence use cases are today between what we get for a typical human's intelligence and Einstein. Probably within the next couple of years, at the most, we will have frontier lab AI systems discovering new physics, doing the kinds of things that Einstein could do. In order to make things look a little bit more scientific, I've got a chart for you here where you can see in the bottom left-hand corner is GPT-2. Very few people were paying attention to AI back then because AI systems could only replace humans on tasks that took a few seconds. It didn't seem very impressive. Where people really started to take notice, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, was around the release of GPT 3.5, and specifically once that was brought into the ChatGPT interface near the end of 2022. That is because AI started being able to replace humans on tasks that took tens of seconds. This started to feel really different. And then when GPT-4 came out, they were like, wow, suddenly this is going to change everything because it was replacing us on tasks that would take several minutes. Now, surprisingly, since then, releases of models like O3, GPT-5 have been met kind of with disappointment, but that's just because people aren't thinking about these problems on the right scales. They're continuing to evaluate GPT-5 on its ability to do tasks that are a few minutes long that GPT-4 could already do. So people were like, oh, it's not a big deal. But when you look at a chart like this, it's clear that it is a big deal because new model releases have continued to push out the envelope in terms of exponentially increasing the length of a human task that it can handle. This is on an exponential scale here. So now we're somewhere in tens of hours that the leading systems like Mythos can handle autonomously. When I put that on a linear scale, it looks way more surprising, right? And in fact, something I want to call your attention to here is that Meter, who are excellent at evaluating state-of-the-art models on their ability to handle tasks, they don't have good benchmarks for anything 16 hours or more. Because imagine how difficult it is even to collect those data, to come up with tasks that are challenging enough that it takes a human several days, and then pay humans to do that task a whole bunch of times so that you have good benchmark data. So I'm sure someone's going to get those kinds of benchmark data, but for now, they've been surprised, they've been caught off guard by how quickly this has changed. And so that dot is at about 18 hours for Claude Mythos, but it could be way more. We just don't have any benchmarks to compare it against. So really wild times. What is allowing these huge breakthroughs in recent months is agentic harnesses, which we've heard a lot about today. So it's not so much the LLMs themselves, it's these agentic frameworks wrapped around them that allow them to double check things and re-output information, use tools. And if I'd been standing here on stage a year ago, of course you folks at Autonomous 25, very forward-thinking people, you would have been aware of agents, but in terms of the public's perception of agents, look at what happened over 2025. 1% of the Google searches in April and May of last year relative to what you're getting today. This is a chart, by the way, from my next book called Engineering AI Agents that I'm writing right now. Hopefully I'll have the first chapter out for you in the O'Reilly platform in about a month. And in that book, in the first chapter, we define exactly what an AI agent is. And this is relevant to what we're talking about here because lots of people use the word agentic, but maybe aren't using it correctly. So I just want to get this definition down. So we're going to define it as an LLM agent that runs tools in a loop to achieve a goal. Let's break that down. The first thing is it's an LLM agent. So we've actually had agentic processes for decades. A cron job is kind of an agentic process. It's something that works autonomously. But what makes agents different today is that you have this LLM powering the agent that allows it to be so much more capable, that allows it to respond to human commands, output code, output text, output images, and so on. And that LLM agent is running tools, things like MCP that we've heard about today, allowing that LLM agent to do millions of things with this model context protocol. So thousands of public MCP servers with millions of capabilities across all of those servers, giving that LLM agent a lot of power. And then it runs in a loop. So lots of capabilities, powerful LLMs running in a loop. We're going to be consuming and generating a lot of data with each LLM call, especially because we are asking it to tackle increasingly challenging goals. And increasingly, instead of having a human directing an agent what to do, you have a dominant agent that is calling sub-agents, potentially hundreds or thousands of them, which means more and more and more and more data. In fact, on my podcast earlier this year, Rohit is quoted as saying that he expects in the coming years enterprise data growth to be going forward at 10x year over year. Imagine that kind of scale. And that kind of scale is going to require new kinds of infrastructure, new ideas in order to be able to function. And I would also like to point out here that some of this enterprise data growth is not just going to be token maxing. Some of it is actually going to be useful as well. So in the old system, human cadence data system, wow, that is not at all what the emoji looked like on my Google slides. We'll see what else breaks in the conversion to Microsoft PowerPoint, or I'm not sure what they're using here. But human cadence data systems were designed for batch queries. They dealt with QA cycles that were about 2 weeks. So when you found a bug, getting that bug squashed in production took about 2 weeks, and policy approvals took 6 weeks when you had some new functionality or you wanted someone in the organization to have data access. In this new agent cadence query load system, wow, that is really interesting. That was just supposed to be the regular robot emoji, the robot emoji face. This is continuous autonomous queries in this paradigm. Self-directed exploration, doing things like the autonomous healing of data, the automatic autonomous healing of data pipelines that we heard about earlier today. Really powerful stuff, bringing these kinds of QA cycles down from 2 weeks to seconds. And all of these things together, meaning that we have that 10x year over year growth happening. Now, this is the reality that most enterprises face today. All of these kinds of different tools, people for years have been the solution that everyone has been proposing, consultants, development teams, et cetera, is that we should be using centralized data warehouse, a lake house. And that paradigm doesn't work anymore because you've got vendor lock-in, of course, cost spirals because compute usage and storage are coupled together. So in this new agentic paradigm, you could have compute or storage needs that should be uncoupled, but instead your cost spirals because they're locked together with most of the traditional vendors like your Databricks, your Snowflakes out there. ETL is expensive when you have lots of different systems different catalogs being queried in sequence or together. You end up with expensive ETL. You have fragmented governance across your different cloud systems, across your on-prem systems. And you can end up in situations where there's no schema context. So you have an agent that's trying to query a database, but it's hallucinating columns, it's missing joins, it's making mistakes because it doesn't have a semantic understanding of the context. So this is the problem that we have today. Let me walk you through an example with a client of mine. So I mentioned that I have an AI software consulting firm, Y Carrot. One of my clients is an industrial automation client. They automate warehouses for their clients. And so they have their software gets rolled out on-prem on their clients' factory floors all over the US. And each one of those requires, different on-prem system running. They also have their own office software, their own agents that we're increasingly helping them get into their knowledge worker systems. And these are completely separate today. You've got the on-prem on all of these different factory floors, and then their cloud set up for the office. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have portable compute where they could say have Spark on those factory floors and in their office, the same portable compute that runs wherever the data live, have a federated catalog that gets rid of those high ETL costs that I was talking about a couple slides ago. You have traveling governance so that your policy travels with your data, so that you can set that policy and know that even if those data go from the factory floor to the office or what have you, the policy moves with the data. You can feel that security, and brilliantly, an intelligent layer across all of this, so you have things like that semantic reasoning, so that when I have agents querying databases, they have an understanding of really what's going on in there and can do it effectively. So back to my client, portable Spark, running Google Kubernetes on their factory floors. Now, with this kind of idea that I'm talking about, they could have that same Spark in the cloud for their knowledge worker processes as well. And then a control plane along the bottom for the federated catalog, the traveling governance, the intelligence. That sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? And it looks a lot like the X-Lake that was revealed today. So in the X-Lake, as we've been hearing about today, you have in the bottom layer the data runtimes, the agentic runtimes, observability, enterprise context, governance happening across all of those runtimes, whether they're on-prem, in cloud, and so on. And on top of that X-Lake platform, you can build whatever data and AI applications you want, including things like the really cool agentic data management that is allowing us to automatically heal our data engineering pipelines. Very cool stuff. Does it work at scale? Yes, it does. This is from a white paper that I got access to prior to today. So it was confidential, prior to today, but now can show publicly this kind of chart showing on the TPC-DS benchmark, which is a rigorous evaluation of queries on a kind of standard 12-node cluster to billions and billions of rows. You're seeing linear scaling, which is beautiful. And not only does it scale, it works in practice. So at very high volume, this has been tested on 45 billion rows with a top 3 US telco in under 2 hours. This is efficient, so you get hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings in examples that have already happened with this system compared to baseline Spark performance, and you get 5 times faster validation on that same benchmark I was showing you on the preceding slide relative to an out-of-the-box Spark setup. So moving to another client of mine, this time a hedge fund in New York, they are currently using Snowflake as their centralized data warehouse. But we are helping them get increasingly large, increasingly data hungry, increasingly data creating AI workloads. And so we are going to need to evaluate, is Snowflake the right situation for this client going forward when we have so much data being consumed and so much data being created by agents? So with the centralized storage, the centralized historical data lake, lakehouse situation, which is the Snowflake style, the Databricks style, in that paradigm, you have managed SaaS. So the deployment is controlled by that vendor, whereas with X-Lake, it's customer-managed Kubernetes. So more flexibility there. Same thing with the runtime, which is proprietary with Databricks, but it's open source with Xlake. In terms of data location, really key problem with agentic AI is that the agents need so much data wherever they're running that if they're running in the cloud and you're sending all that data to them, you're going to have a lot of cost, you're going to have a lot of inefficiency. And so one of the beautiful things, perhaps my favorite thing that I'm going to hit on a number of times more in this talk in the remaining few minutes, is that with Xlake, the data stay where they live and the compute moves to it instead. That is a big paradigm shift that is essential to this new agentic era. In terms of governance, same kind of story as we're seeing with some of these other rows. It's proprietary for Databricks, portable, and open source for Xlake. In terms of cost, I talked about this earlier, but it's worth mentioning again. In this new agentic paradigm that's unfolding with all these new agentic capabilities, you increasingly want your compute and your storage to be decoupled so that you right-size cost, and you get that with Xlake. And then finally, there are AI integration options for the centralized data warehouse kind of option, but it isn't the same kind of schema where AI Studio that you get with Xlake, where you get that wonderful semantic understanding of what's happening in all of your databases. And yes, for those of you taking photos as I unveiled each row, this is the final row, so you won't have to take another one. All right, so altogether, to summarize things, with this new Xlake paradigm, I'm really excited about it because you get AI at speed, trusted data fast, you get self-healing pipelines thanks to this agentic data management, cost discipline, decoupled, right size, like I was just talking about on the last slide, and always on compliance, where your policy travels with your data and your compute travels to where the data are. So the idea is you can be flexible with your data, the policy moves with it, but once you get the data there, the compute will move to where the data are, which is what we need in this new high data consumption, high data creation, agentic paradigm. So for my industrial automation clients, we get portable Spark on-site and in cloud. We get a federated catalog spanning both surfaces, relieving our ETL cost issues. And we get one governance regime end-to-end, keeping executives and IT happy with what's going on with all these agentic AI agents. And fundamentally, this means that we no longer need to be making the decision, should I have a cloud environment? Should I have an on-prem environment? You can now have both on one single architecture. So the data don't move anymore, the compute does. This is the big paradigm shift that we have now in this agentic era and that Xlake facilitates. Bring that back. Oh, you want some photos of that slide? Yeah, all right, I'll give it back. There you go, there you go. Move too fast, now you got it. So the data don't move anymore, the compute does. And that really matters. That matters today more than ever with these huge models consuming so much data, working for it doesn't necessarily work for 16 hours, but imagine an autonomous system. You could have hundreds, thousands of autonomous systems running in parallel today in your enterprise, doing tasks that would take a human 16 hours long and generating all that code. This is a new era. We need a new infrastructure solution like Xlake in order to be able to make use of all of this capability. And going back to my initial slide about this, some people are concerned about the pace that things are moving at. I really just see a lot of opportunity. But some people think that as we get past Einstein and we're looking down the tracks at AI coming fast, we're soon, as the AI rushes past us in terms of intelligence, we're approaching the singularity, artificial superintelligence, all kinds of very scary things. Who knows what lies over that horizon, but between now and then, there are going to be a lot of great commercial opportunities as long as you set yourself up with a system like Xlake. All right, that's the end of my talk. Can you put the slides back up though? Yeah. I was on, yeah. So for people who want the slides, I've got them at jonkrohn.com/talks. I guess I should have told you that before you started taking all the photos. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if we aren't already. If you mentioned that you were here today, I'll for sure accept that. Happy to chat about anything. And if you're interested in kind of the AI engineering aspect of things, I've got a YouTube channel with lots of great videos, including particularly this 4-hour Agentic AI hands-on training with the brilliant Ed Donner. So yeah, check that out. All right, thank you very much.